I've got another feminist confessional. You know, the kind where they get old and say it was all a big fat lie. Clock starts ticking, time starts running out, and that's when they say it. But hey, when they were in their early 20s, certainly didn't feel like a lie. When all those men were throwing attention at them, nope. Only 40 years later do they realize. I regret belittling men. At 63, I've ended up alone. How kind of her. And here is the woman we're talking about here, Kate Mulvey. So a few years ago, I went to Italy with my then boyfriend, James, as we sat tucking into a plate of, I'm not even going to try to read that, at a seaside restaurant. I struck up a conversation with the waiter in Italian. While I was enjoying myself, James sat glumly and fiddled awkwardly with his phone. Back in the hotel room, he asked why I had ignored him by speaking in a language he didn't understand. He said I had managed to make him feel small. I could see his point. I spent quite a while chatting away, oblivious to how he must be feeling. I then went on to joke that as the Italian speaker, I would just order for us. After all, he didn't know what osso buco meant. I was showing off. It wasn't the first time something like this had happened to me. I have always taken the driving seat, been determined to get the last word, and was too busy with books to master the art of charm. I'm convinced that the reason I'm still booking a table for one at the age of 63 instead of having settled with a significant other is because, like so many women of my generation, feminism has ruined my love life. Instead of empowering us, those ideas of the second wave feminists made us believe marriage and domesticity were to be avoided like the plague, and that men were competition rather than partners. I might have a successful career as a writer and broadcaster, but I have never had children or been married. My longest relationship lasted 8 years. I regret this. I had always imagined I would end up married with 2 wonderful children and living in a house in the countryside. I have paid a hefty price for my so-called liberation. I was 17 and a pupil at GNL, one of Britain's most academic institutions, when I was introduced to the women's liberation movement. It offered such hope and excitement, and we spent our lunch breaks soaking up the feminist mantras of Germaine Greer and Betty Friedan. Act like men, they cried as they burnt their bras and demonized housework in the family. By the time I was 25, clutching a degree in French and Italian, I was a bright, confident feminist, keen to flex her intellectual muscles and to never let a man get the last word. I read Nietzsche for fun, and my bedside table has always buckled beneath the weight of substantial, intellectually challenging books. At first, men loved my wit and intelligence. You're such a breath of fresh air. I love talking to you. You're the first woman I've met who stimulates me. They'd trill. That was until I had lectured them for the umpteenth time on the virtues of modernism. You'll never win an argument against Kate, one man said as he watched me outsmart yet another potential lover. Goodness gracious. Subtext, don't bother. Men have called me intimidating, scary, and opinionated. How about annoying? I now see that not only was I trying to prove I was their intellectual equal or superior, I was treating every encounter with a man like he was my adversary. If a date bought me a bouquet of flowers, instead of smiling and putting them in a vase of water, I would bite their head off. Can't you buy me some nice olive oil or balsamic vinegar? I said with an eye roll. To one hapless suitor as he stood wilting faster than the fragrant offering he held in his hand. He had bothered to think about making me happy, and I crushed him for it. I placed so much importance on finding a strong man who could match me that I forgot men are people with feelings. Wow. What? Just dehumanizing them? Indeed, I forgot I had feelings and hid my softness. I now see that I longed to be loved, but I was too scared to be vulnerable. What a bunch of bullshit. I was using my sharp mind to project my all too soft heart against yet further rejection. Another thing I regret deeply is my tally of one-night stands when I was younger. I distinctly remember thinking it would be uncool to say no to the men I met at parties or dated, but I struggled to enjoy it. There was always a disconnect. This was abundantly clear the morning after. As I lay there waiting for a sign of affection, he would be singing the triumphant Had Her song in the shower. A quick cheerio and he was gone. While I pretended to enjoy it, I felt uncomfortable about sex so early on. I felt empty and used. My generation of women were encouraged to have sex like a man. In other words, have casual sex, but it backfired. Fast forward to now, the idea that women are different from men and that casual sex can be harmful to us is gaining traction. In her latest book, A New Guide to Sex in the 21st Century, The Young Adult Adaptation, Louise Perry explores how the sexual revolution impacted women negatively and led to unwanted consequences. She argues that casual sex, dating apps, pornography, and the normalization of sexual kinks are putting women at risk. Although contraception has reduced the chances of pregnancy, she points to the risk of contracting diseases or being a victim of violence in a culture where premarital sex is the norm. She believes that society would benefit from returning to traditional values about sex. Don't get me wrong, I'm not advocating a return to the 1950s when women were on the shelf by 30 and getting a suitable husband was their goal in life, but I wonder if by refusing to show any chinks in my intellectual armor, I'm the one who is losing out. Whilst I will never be a giggly man-pleaser, what a shame, and have no intention of playing second fiddle to a man, the confident signals I have been giving out all these years were at odds with what is going on inside. I have learned to step back and let things go and have realized that things mustn't always veer towards the satisfaction of the self. I am struck by how easy and peaceful it feels to let my dates/boyfriends take the lead. It is not a case of dumbing down or morphing into a Stepford woman, but simply dialing down a bit of me and letting them shine. I think it's funny how at 63, she's now talking about how feminism lied and how it made her develop a personality that men find unbearable. And it's just like, yeah, no kidding. You know, if your mind was really as sharp as you say it is, wouldn't you have figured this out a long time ago, maybe by the age of 20? Like, it really doesn't take a genius. I mean, she was rude, arrogant, and condescending, treating men like opponents, thinking everything is a debate she has to win, made everything with men a competition because she saw them as adversaries. It's like, no wonder men didn't want to stick around. And if we're going to talk about feminists, they are often the ones with the most exaggerated hypergamous tendencies. They look at marrying a man who's their equal or just an average man, and they see it as settling, even as some form of like patriarchal oppression, because they think, you know, that's something women in the past had to do. Marry early, marry practically, find a provider. But now as liberated women, they see it as freedom to hold out for the best of the best, and they call that empowerment. But I mean, really, it's just hypergamy, right? And of course, with those men, they find out quickly they are only good enough for sex. But to be clear, it's not just feminists who are hypergamous, right? Hypergamy has always been a part of the female nature. But the difference now is that there's nothing holding it in check. I think a good creation of strategical patriarchy is also monogamy, because it gives every man a stake in the game, and it ensures that the majority of men will have access to family, and to legacy. And so when men have something to build for, they'll build nations. And it's also better for militaries as well. And when that system collapses, what you get instead is a smaller percentage of men monopolizing the dating pool while the rest are left out. And of course, you know, that destabilizes relationships, as well as society. And actually, you'll see a lot of men who come from like polygamous nations migrating west in an attempt to get away from that. But what they don't realize is that here in the West, it's becoming more and more like that as feminism gets stronger. And, you know, the red pill has emerged as a reaction to this shift. And it teaches game, obviously preaches self-improvement, informs us on female psychology, And that all helps us to raise a man's sexual market value so he can compete in an environment where balance no longer exists. So when we're talking about this woman, right, keep in mind, it was always the men that she found good enough for herself who would reject her. And of course they would, because they find women like this insufferable and they have a lot of options. And so the conversation is always about women not being able to find marriage material men, or, how there aren't enough good men out there. But no one really considers, where are the marriage material women? Right? It's very clear that this woman has a massive ego and still does. And so on the top, like feminism, it's built on an oppressor dynamic, which is, why it's synonymous with Marxism. And it also gives feminists permission to mock masculinity because men are the perceived oppressors. But in reality, these same men are the ones who built every part of the world that these women live in. And they benefit greatly from male inventiveness. And feminism hasn't necessarily lied either. So many of these women will come along and say it lied to me. Well, it's always been pretty honest about what it is. It tells women to hate men, despise marriage, chase career, casual sex, never settle, and call all of that power and liberation. And these women follow it word for word. I guess the only lie is that all of that will make you happy and fulfilled in the end. But, if these women were truly as sharp as they claim to be, you think they would reach that conclusion on their own, that it wouldn't eventually lead there. They'd figure it out sooner because they're so damn intelligent. And in time, as always, we see these same women run out of time and they start scrambling.